There was once a curious creature known as man. Man had 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head, which included the majority of the important features. But contrary to popular scientific belief, the most important of those features was not man's brain, which he really all too rarely used, but his eyes. For man was only ever interested in 2 things: himself and sex. Since his emergence from the primordial ooze, man's self-absorption has resulted in the constant creation of drawings, paintings, and sculptures, all intended to resemble an idealized version of himself. These, a lot of self-serious folk would later chalk up to be important representations of the so-called human condition, and attach to them big words like art. But it really wasn't ever about much more than man lustfully trying to find new ways of gazing upon himself. And although he didn't know it then, that desire would lead to perhaps man's most important creation. As opposed to popular belief, the remarkable invention that came to be known as the camera came about purely by accident. In a small forgotten village, there were 2 men of science, neither looking which way they were walking, and when they ran headfirst into one another, some of the chemicals that they were carrying smashed into each other. And inexplicably, the first photograph was born. Local government officials considered burning them at the stake, as it had been a while since the town had had a good old-fashioned witch burning, and this was pretty close to qualifying. But the men of science attempted to convince them that they had stumbled onto something truly extraordinary. They were burned anyway. The news traveled quickly, soon reaching the ears of influential moneymen who realized the massive implications of the photograph. The 2 scientists' accidental experimentation was recreated and contained, and thus the age of the camera was born. People say that the modern world was built on the back of electricity, but that was false. For it was the camera that showed man a life different from his own, and quietly instructed him that that was actually the thing he'd always wanted all along.
For some, there's a far-off lake, where the boats go whizzing by. For others, Cameraland is their own front yard, where the kids go whizzing by. Cameraland can be a quiet place just made for sharing together.
Which in all reality was really just a more subtle way of shouting in his face, "You are not good enough." And thus we have the very makeup of our modern society, because as soon as he saw photographs of others, man never ceased wishing he could be anyone but himself. And because he couldn't, he stopped at nothing to constantly improve his own image. For instance, as it turned out, no one knew what smiling was until the camera arrived, when everyone suddenly realized that they all looked horribly annoyed or just depressed. This led to the creation of instructional classes on how to properly smile, and also the practice of dentistry. Yes, this new technological marvel affected every corner of man's life and often just created new corners itself. There were consumer cameras, and man soon learned both the joy of getting a roll of developed film back, and also the sinking depression upon realizing that all of the exposures were either too dark or out of focus. There were movie cameras that highlighted the lives of the rich and famous and made everyone feel worse about themselves. And then consumer movie cameras, so parents could capture all of those dance recitals and football games that they'd surely watch on repeat forever and ever and ever and ever. Yes, there was something for everyone. People who felt bad about themselves spent all of their time going to movies and gazing at pictures of other people and excused it all by calling it all escapism.
And my heart beats so that I can hardly speak.
And people who felt really bad about themselves bought tabloids. And also nudie mags. There were digital cameras and film cameras, and many preferred the latter, and referred to it with words like magic. But they were mostly just people who needed to get lives. There were cell phone cameras so the teenagers could take pictures that they dreadfully regret only a few short years later. And then came Instagram, so man could be reminded to feel miserable about himself when he looked at his phone every 5 minutes. And then of course there were the paparazzi. But they were just doing their jobs. They wouldn't exist if no one cared. Yes, the camera was the source of much cynicism and narcissism and made so very many people feel quite miserable. But it wasn't entirely an evil. For now and again, there came an unanticipated byproduct that occurred in the all too brief moments when man saw beyond himself. Empathy. something that no one could have imagined the camera would be so wonderful at revealing, and something that just perhaps made it all worth it. Thank you so much for watching. This episode was brought to you by Skillshare. If you don't know, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes available covering graphic design, filmmaking, animation, and so much more. This short film, which is really my first attempt at doing any kind of traditional hand-drawn animation, really just wouldn't have been possible without the amazing instructional classes found on Skillshare. They saved me from so many headaches and really helped me speed up the overall process of putting this whole thing together. It's really an invaluable source that I can't recommend enough, and not only that, but it's actually a more affordable learning platform than most of the others that are out there, with an annual subscription coming in at less than $10 a month. But right now, the first 500 people to sign up will get their first 2 months completely free. Go to skl.sh/RoyalOcean4 to sign up today.